Today's episode is brought to you by 9centprinting.com. With over 100 five-star reviews, 9centprinting.com is ready to meet all your printing needs. Are you a church plant or small church with no copy machine? No problem. 9cent Printing has you covered. If you need bulletins, flyers, books, cards, offering envelopes, posters, they do it all. I know the Christian owners of this business personally, and I'm not just a fan, I'm also a customer. Fast, nationwide shipping, affordable, professional, wow printing at wow prices. Check them out at 9centprinting.com.
End scene. Okay.
End scene. Dude.
There's like a word, there's like the thing you do for that. I can't remember, like a motion you do for like end scene or something like that.
So like
that's all I was thinking. Like,
and yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. Amarillo, Texas, bro.
yeah.
Oof.
What you know about Amarillo?
So I went to Ozark and we had
You drove through there.
Yes, we had students that were from Amarillo, from Paramount Terrace Christian Church. And one girl in particular, her dad was the pastor at that church. And so she married one of my good friends. And so we spent like multiple days in Amarillo for a wedding. So I'm from Oregon, and I flew down to California to go hang out with a friend of mine who drove home for Christmas break. And then we loaded up the car with a few of us, drove out to Amarillo, hung there. Man, my first impression of Amarillo is it smells like cow manure no matter which way the wind's blowing.
24/7.
But they were saying, hey, that's the smell of money. So I'm like, all right, I guess that's what you say. But also, I remember we went to breakfast one time, and we come in, and being West Coasters, we're like, yeah, non-smoking, please. So the lady takes us over to a table, removes the ashtray, and goes, there you go. Now it's non-smoking, but the table next to us, so
See,
like we ain't Oregon anymore, boys. So that was so funny.
Yeah.
that's you're aging yourself whenever you start saying smoking and non-smoking.
Yeah, dude. Yeah.
Dude, when I went to Joplin, Missouri, I'm like an Oregon guy, born and raised, and went to Missouri for Bible college. And this is like in the 90s. I went to the grocery store with my wife, and there were people smoking in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? They have people. I'm over there like buying fresh produce, and some guys smoking like a chimney over and I'm like, where am I? Like, where did I come? Oregon, of course, is very progressive. So anything like smoking in public or that, we were like way ahead of the rest of the country, all that kind of stuff. So, and it caught up, and it's, but I was like, oh my gosh, dude, like that. The only place I had ever been around smoking in my life was a bowling alley.
Yeah.
And in my childhood, they made that illegal. So,
man, like I remember, like, as a kid, I mean, we were like, what, 10 years apart? A little more than that, I guess.
Yeah.
I remember even places like restaurants here in Clatsop County would have smoking, but it was like a separate, like an entirely separate room.
Yeah.
Its own like exhaust system.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like all that business. So
if you're like in a restaurant that has smoking back in the day, like even if there's a non-smoking section, you're getting it, like it's not like the smoke stays contained,
Yeah, right.
All right, I'll do the intro again. We can jump into the second half. All right. Welcome to the Small Town Pastor Podcast. This podcast is a ministry of the Small Town Network. We exist to make disciples, train pastors, and plant churches in smaller communities. We are joined again today by Tony Colomb and Mario Romero. This is the second half of our talk with Mario, and we are going to talk about his journey to church planting in Caldwell, Idaho. So, Mario, take it away, man. Tell us from the established church you left kind of into the church planting arena with Evergreen and all that. What happened? Tell us the story.
Yeah. So rewind real quick to
Sure.
2016. October of 2016 was kind of like another one of those audible moments. I remember waking up about 5 in the morning, just like the Lord really putting it on our heart to plant a church.
Hmm.
Uh, and like, you know, in true Christian fashion, you hear that call and you think, oh, like that means tomorrow the church has to be planted. And that's kind of, you know, and so, you know, woke up from that, shared that with Jamie, and we kind of started having conversations. And, you know, again, we assumed like it was going to be quick and like kind of almost like our McKinney experience where it was going to happen within, you know, a year or whatever. Um, we went through a church planning organization and, you know, did the kind of an assessment, and they were like, nope, like you're not, you're not a planting pastor, you know. And I still don't have entrepreneurial skills, and that's one of the things that they'd, you know, hammered me on back then. And so we were just kind of like, all right, like, you know, whatever, like we still feel this desire in our heart. And so whenever we moved out here to Idaho and we were looking for churches, we went to the welcome lunch at the church that we ended up going to. And one of the questions my wife asked was, where do you see your church in 5 years? And Nick, a good friend of ours, was the pastor. And he said, you know, I'd really like us to be a church that plants other churches.
Hmm.
And that right there was like, we're in. Like that's our heart, is like we want to be part of a church that plants churches, whether that was us or whatever. Like we just want to be part of that multiplication process. And so we started attending there in August of 19. And then of course, you know, COVID happened early of 2020. They the church kind of closed for a little bit, kind of wrestling again. Everybody was kind of like, what do we do, stuff like that. And then in August, they had opened their doors back up. In August, they asked if I'd come on staff as their connections guy. And so I came on staff, and Nick and I just kind of got to talking more, and kind of again the vision for the church, and what we wanted, you know, how the church to keep moving forward. And we both had a heart for planting, and I think Nick was the one that introduced me to Eric. I think we met at one of the
Oh, the Valley Network
Valley
thing.
Network things.
Yeah, yeah.
We met, yeah. Um, and then we just kind of started talking from there of what does that look like, and again, so we're talking from 2016 to 2022, I think is when we met, early 2022. Um, the idea for a church plant was kind of the only idea I knew at the time, was more traditional.
Yeah.
Kind of the attractional traditional mindset. But at the same time, while that thinking was happening, I was also wrestling with like, there has to be something different. I love preaching, but I don't want to preach every week. Like, is the sermon supposed to be something that we're all centered around? Like, what, you know, just kind of having these questions about how we do church, and the future of the church and stuff like that. And so whenever I stepped away from Canyon in 2023, we were kind of already on the on ramp to planting, but we kind of slowed down a little bit, and we're really wrestling with what is God calling us to do. Like, and I think it's a very, you know, whoever plants a church, it is going to be like, what is God calling you to do in that? Like, whether it's traditional, attractional, you know, anything like that, more liturgical stuff like that. And so we were really just wrestling with God. What do you want us to do here in Idaho? A little bit different than where we're used to in California, and you know, and so that's where, and Tony and Eric. Tony is the president of Evergreen, and Eric were really helpful in helping me just with some language that I was wrestling with.
Can you just like explain that real quick? Like because I think this is important. Like we even like before we started filming today, I was like talking with you about I don't want to put words in your mouth because words have meaning, and unfortunately, in church planting world, some of the words we throw around don't mean the same things to everybody. So, would you just kind of quickly talk about like what are some of those key the language thing you're wrestling with?
Yeah. I think I was wrestling with like house church, micro church,
Mm.
uh, and and um, and then even I went through a whole church planning cohort, and so even some of the things that they were saying are like you need to make sure you do this. I was like yeah, that like I see that working in a traditional sense, but how does that fit into something different? Is it really
Mhm.
necessary? So you know priorities change. I think community and worship was a big word that we were looking at differently, um, in what that would look like with microchurch. So that was kind of a word that we were pushing back a little bit. Um, and then just yeah, microchurch was one of those words that I was like, I don't know, you
Mhm.
know, if that's a language that we want to use. Um,
When some people use these words, Mario, part of what we're circling around is that some
Mhm.
people use these words as a description of a strategy. Um, so like some people will say DMM and they're like disciple making movement and DMM is a strategy. But then other people will kind of use that as a style.
Mhm.
Some people use micro as a strategy, like micro is like a strategy of how do you plant churches that plant churches and they're all small. Other people would use that just as kind of an adjective and say our church is kind of a micro church, meaning it's small. So when you like throw these terms around with people, like even like we've said on this podcast, attractional. What's attractional ministry?
Mhm.
And so when you sit down with people, and it gets even more complicated when you start talking to people from different tribes, because we all have kind of our own definition of, even like you said, community. Well, it's biblical community. Uh, it's gathering with 5,000 of my closest friends in a big auditorium on Sunday, of course.
yeah,
Or someone else thinks it's like it's, no more than 10 in a living room, where everyone knows each other's names. And so it is, I just want to say, like, you were up against something real.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of pinpoint what is it this new church is going to be about? What's it
Yeah.
going to be like? What's our strategy? And so you landed on what would you call your church?
so United Church is a micro church movement. Uh,
Micro church movement. Okay, so what does the movement add to micro?
so the movement implies that we are being intentional about discipling and multiplying.
Okay,
Like we want other micro churches to be planted in the valley. Um,
Mhm.
so we have two going right now.
that's
Um,
great, man.
yeah, uh, but I think it's funny because we've been at it, like we officially launched earlier this year, but we've been at it now for a year and a half, and I still find it sometimes difficult to explain to other
Mhm.
Christians about what we're doing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Because again, a lot of people just know traditional church service, whether they're
Right.
Presbyterian, Christian evangelical, they kind of just know the Sunday morning service with three songs, communion, and a message.
Mhm.
Um, and so even explaining like, no, we're not getting a building. Oh, and
Yeah.
you're meeting in houses? Yeah. Who's how? Like, so it's funny, just kind of like the looks we get, the questions we get. Um,
Well,
but
I'm sure even like landing on that kind of philosophy or strategy or structure, however you want to word it for a church, is like the launch strategy to actually planting your real church in most people's minds, right? Like in the church world. Oh, well, yeah, that's of course that's what you do when you're starting a church. You meet in small groups and homes until you can actually get a large church, you know? And
yeah,
I feel like and I don't know if this is the case for you, but even like not just with Christians, but sometimes with non-church people, like trying to explain, they even have like a stereotype in their mind, like, oh, but you go to a building and you have all these things. So it's a hard thing to fight against when you're trying to do something unique or different.
Yeah, and I think one way that we try to like remedy that a little bit, like so we're not completely like marginalizing traditional church. I don't know if that's even the right word, but is like so on the first Sunday of every month, our micro churches get together, and that's our we call that United Sunday, where we get together, and that's kind of more of an equipping time that we take, of like more intentional on equipping. And not like again the every other Sunday is invite whoever you want, bring them out, stuff like that. But the first Sunday of the month, like if they want to come to that, great. Like we're not saying nobody can come, but that's going to be more equipping with probably more of your Christianese type language and assumptions that we understand as churchgoers.
So with all this in mind, so you're starting a micro church movement, which started with your house with some people, and then eventually was able to launch a second location, a second house micro church. So there's implications in this that I want to make sure we talk about. So um, you are bivocational, right?
Yep.
So for people that don't know a lot about church planting, a lot of times in a traditional plant, there is a big period of fundraising, and we're trying to raise big money. And a lot of that, if we're just being candid, goes to the salary of the pastor who's starting the church. And then with that, there's a pressure to get the church's funding up to a certain threshold before the money that you've raised runs out, so that you can continue to employ the pastor. And a lot of our churches that don't make it, if we're just being really honest, don't make it because of money issues. A guy moves his family to a community. They raise this money. They're trying to start a new church. The money runs out. The money's not coming in. And now it's like, how do I feed my family? Legitimate concerns, legitimate questions. And for a lot of people, that's where the church falls. And there's not a new church established. We could argue all day about the merits of that or the problems of that, but you've not gone that way. Again, these are terms that we have to kind of define. Would you say you're bivocational, co-vocational? What's the word you would use?
Yes. Whichever one anybody feels more comfortable.
You have another job, is that?
Yeah, I have a full-time job that pays.
There you go.
Okay.
What is that? What is that full-time job?
I'm a hospice chaplain.
Okay. So real quickly, I don't
wow.
want to spend a lot of time on that, but
Dude,
what does that mean?
God bless you, bro.
What does that mean?
So typically people will go on hospice whenever the doctor kind of gives them, 6 months or less. And so we're kind of, walking with people in their last days. And that can be in their home. It could be in a facility. Wherever the patient is where we go. And so yeah, it's just, like meeting people where they're at. Whether they're Christians, agnostics, atheists, Buddhists, Muslim, if they allow us to come see them, we just meet them where we're at.
So that's your full-time job, and you're in the middle of trying to start a micro church movement. So how is that? What's that like for people? Like if they're trying to imagine themselves having a secular job and then doing like a church plant, what's that like?
Because before I was doing the hospice chaplain, I was doing the domestic violence counseling, and I was only working part-time there. And whenever I got the full-time job, I realized I had less time with church stuff. And really what that did was it made me focus on what really needed to be focused on with the church. Because I think, and I'm not harping on anybody, but whenever we have like a lot of time, we can think of so many different ideas and then just go with them. And And really not even all of those ideas are like, let's be honest, like they're not always great ideas. But because we had them, we think they're great ideas. And so we spend a lot of time on them. And so getting the full-time job really was kind of a relief of like, oh, I don't have to really think of a lot of stuff to do with the church. Like, how do we? And so it kind of really just helped me be more focused and intentional on what are we really trying to do? Like, where are we at in this season? What do we really want to do? What are some, steps that we can actually take? And then how do I implement that into my schedule?
Yeah, man, you're bringing up something that we don't talk a lot about in church, and not because it's a big secret, but I think a lot of people just don't think about it. Is that I heard a guy say it this way one time. He said basically, pastors are paid full time, and then they get to create things for themselves to do. And that's not being sarcastic or like
Oh,
pessimistic. It's just the reality is there the things that when you have a full-time pastor on a staff, youth or whatever, there's some like things in the calendar that you're required to do every Sunday or every week rather, including Sunday. But then there's these stretches of time where you get to decide as kind of a self-manager, what things you're going to do. And some guys do things to try to grow the church. Some guys are very pastoral and they just do a lot of relational and visiting kind of things. Some guys that's for the drivers that really want to grow the church. They're coming up with ideas about programs or things they can do to grow the church. But when you don't have the luxury of that time, what it forces you to do is to very quickly clarify what are the things I have to do that have to be true every week or every day of me because I don't have the luxury of the time to do all these things that regular, ordinary churches do. And so you just kind of brought up, kind of what is like the dirty secret of full-time vocational ministry. So let me ask you, what are the things that's kind of forced you to be most attentive to because you have all this, very limited time?
I think for us, because we are doing something a little different, right? It was like, okay, how do I like we're still helping our churches kind of like own the vision 100%. So how do we help them draw closer to one another? Because we're all coming from different spaces to come closer to one another and realize this vision so that they can start living it out and sharing it and really being part of the movement instead of just following the leader.
Hmm.
That's really what we want. Like I want to raise up people who say, I want to do one of those in my house, even though I'm not fully trained with a degree. Like I think I can do something similar. All right, cool, let's do it. So yeah.
So in our remaining few minutes, like give me like the top few like things you love about what you're doing and maybe a couple of the challenges so that the people who are, like maybe thinking about like a micro movement model, what are some of the things that you just love about it and what are some of the things that are like the challenges?
Um, the things that I love about it is so we adopted kind of like the DBS. We talk about styles and methods and stuff. We do um the DBS style, discipleship Bible study. So
Discovery
we're
Bible study.
discovery Bible study, yeah.
What are you
So
doing again?
yeah, yeah. So we're going through the book of John, and I still do kind of like my homework and make sure that we're staying in context and everything like that. But we have a week that a passage that we read, and we're saying, okay, like, where's the Spirit? How are they speaking to you? How's the Spirit speaking? What are you hearing? Where's Jesus in this? How do we share that in our own words, with somebody in our life? And so again, like, I think one thing that I really love is we're trying to do something that I think anybody can do. The questions are part of the books that we have, and so it's you can do this anywhere with anybody. Another thing too, it's in the comfort of our home on couches. We we do brunch we eat, we do communion, and
Mm.
we're in the Word, um, and we really get to know people there. They get to bring their joys, their sorrows, and we share in all of that every week. Um, the challenge, I think, is oftentimes fighting um, the traditional or imposed idea of what church is supposed to be.
Mm.
You won't see our church on social media too much. We don't post too much on social media. You won't ever see cool pictures of 50 baptisms from our church. And God, I love seeing those.
Yeah,
uh,
sure.
and sometimes I'm like, man, Lord, that I like energy. I love like that stuff. Really, like I'm for that stuff, but I'm also like, that's not what God called us to do. And so sometimes I'm like, Lord, like that looks so cool. Like I want to be part of something like that. uh,
Mm.
and then but to just be obedient of like, no, Lord, this is where you have us. And so sometimes that pull is still like, man, I miss being part of a church staff and making things up of what I want to do. And you know
Mm.
uh, but so I think some of that's the struggle. And then also too, just I think in this setting you realize how much unlearning has to happen for discipleship to happen.
Dude, that's so, yeah. Both of the guys that I've hired, like to come in here with me, they were like from different large church settings that I'm like, dude, the first year is going to be you unlearning,
Mm.
some things because your reflex is going to want to go to bigger, faster, better, all that. And it's not what we're doing. And it's hard because it's deeply ingrained. So you kind of said something that maybe if I'm on the wrong track, just tell me so. But it sounds like part of that, and I've had the struggle, that's why I'm asking, is like, is some of this like identity? Because like we're kind of trained in our way of thinking to do this way, and then we're going this way, and kind of our self-worth can kind of be caught up in the metrics of this way.
Mm.
We're caught up in like how many baptisms did you have this year and how many people came on Sunday and now we're going this way and like all these ways we define success are no longer applicable. That's not how we define success anymore. Is there a struggle in there at all for you or has there been?
Yeah, I think I think part of it could be self-identity. Some of it can also just be um the way in which we view or value position or titles, right? Again, you look at somebody who's baptizing 50 people, the pastor, you're like, oh my gosh, like God is moving over there, like they
Yeah.
must be like on fire or whatever. And then you take like a pastor who's just, you know man, we had one person from our neighborhood come, and that's our celebration for the month. And
Mm.
that's not viewed, like those are not viewed on equal
Yeah.
Mm.
standings. And so I think some of it is identity, and some of it is just how we value
Mm.
um, the idea of the word pastor, and church, and even the what church is in that, you know what I mean? And um so I think again there's definitely like, man, it would be nice to be looked at as like a real pastor that has these 50 baptisms,
A
you
real
know.
pastor.
Yeah. And, and but then again it's just like, oh, like I am a real pastor.
Uh,
It's just not being the metrics are completely different.
yeah, man. It's
Not
just
completely, I won't say completely different, they're just, you know what I mean, like I
it's
don't want,
different. Yeah.
they are different. And that's not devaluing or pedestaling any type of pastor, but our metrics are different in that. um
Right.
and so yeah.
Absolutely. Well, man, I'm excited for you and what you're doing. And like I said earlier, I think you're kind of, this might sound dramatic, but kind of tip of the spear of what's coming. I think that you and people like you that are what you're doing, we're going to see more and more of that. as the American church moves forward, and we need people to be pioneering this. In a weird way, you kind of wonder, like, are we pioneering, or are we just kind of reclaiming
Mhm.
the New Testament's original vision of what it means to be a disciple? I do want to say, just shameless plug, we have a book on smalltownnetwork.com. You can click on resources and training materials, and there's a book called Church Planting Foundations, and we run people through it that are interested in planting, because it forces us to define terms. And the questions are, who is Jesus? What is the gospel? What is a disciple? What is a pastor? What is a church? And when you go to the scripture to define those things, it's funny that a lot of the things that we kind of think are affirmed, but a lot of them are challenged, where you go, man, what is the church? Is the church with, the massive campus and locations and thousands of people the same? Is that a church? And is the group that meets in Mario's living room with brunch, is that a church? Yes.
Mhm.
Um, and so to kind of wrestle through that, and when you realize what kind of makes church a church, you realize that there's room in the kingdom for all kinds of expressions of church. And
Mhm.
as the church in America moves forward, and we don't have time to get into all the reasons why, but my suspicion is that we're going to see a lot more, pastors with second jobs or full-time jobs leading congregations from homes. And I just think it's awesome that you're doing it. And I know it's something that brings you a lot of joy. I'm sure it's not easy. Um, but when you talk about, man, we sit with a small group of people in my living room, have food, and listen to the Holy Spirit speak to us as we evaluate the scripture. I'm like ready to quit my job, move to Caldwell. I will join you. I'll be the next house church leader. But I don't want to be a hospice chaplain.
Hey,
I'm just not wired for that. So
yeah, that's in
yeah.
my, everybody has their niche. That's in my little niche. But
If I could
yeah,
get paid to be like a hunter full time, that would be amazing.
Oh,
hey,
man.
it happens.
I know, like, they get paid to, like, there's like you can get like bounties. People who are listening from the Midwest are going to be like, you can get bounties for shooting wolves in Idaho.
Yeah, but those professional hunters, social media, that's how
Yep.
they make their living. It's all the social media stuff.
I will
Yep.
look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mario, thanks for your time today, man. It's been great having you on. How do
Mhm.
people, if they want to find you guys online, what's your website?
The website is weareunited.church.
Okay, weareunited.church, and I'll put that in the links too, so people can find you online. Any parting words you want to say, anything as we wrap it up?
Yeah, again, what we're doing, I don't know if I wouldn't call this the tip of the spear. You have like Tampa Underground and Kansas City Underground and now Boise Underground. So this has been going on.
Yeah.
The micro church movement is going on for a while now, and I agree. I think it's definitely something that we're starting to see more of. But yeah, I think be faithful wherever God has you, whether it's in a large church, small church. Just continue to be faithful.
Yep.
Well
Amen.
said. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Be sure to check out our sponsors at 9centprinting.com. If you like what we're doing, please like or subscribe wherever you watch or listen. And if you're interested in the Small Town Network, you can find us online at smalltownnetwork.com. If you believe in the importance of planting disciple-making churches in smaller communities, we'd love you to consider partnering with us in prayer and financial support. You've been listening to the Small Town Pastor Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by 9centprinting.com. With over 100 five-star reviews, 9centprinting.com is ready to meet all your printing needs. Are you a church plant or small church with no copy machine? No problem. 9cent Printing has you covered. If you need bulletins, flyers, books, cards, offering envelopes, posters, they do it all. I know the Christian owners of this business personally, and I'm not just a fan, I'm also a customer. Fast, nationwide shipping, affordable, professional, wow printing at wow prices. Check them out at 9centprinting.com.